So, Titans Season 1. This was a review that I was meant to get out a lot earlier than it is currently now. I finished watching this show literally at the same time that it finished in the US on the DC streaming service, but I just couldn't make a review of it back then because I didn't really know how to feel about this season. But considering that the time I'm recording this today, the show is now officially out on Netflix internationally, I've had the chance to go back and watch a few episodes again that I didn't particularly know what to think of when I originally watched them, and get a chance to rewatch them again and see if I could make a full opinion on them. And having done so on that, and now feeling like I can make a review on Titans, my overall opinion on the show is it's decent. I mean, it's certainly got elements about it that are great, do not get me wrong on that. I think there are a lot of areas where the show definitely falls flat, and a few areas where I feel like it's very unnecessary and gratuitous, but it is definitely watchable, but I would definitely not put this up there as one of the best seasons in DC Entertainment on the TV service. Now let's talk about my positives, and let's start with my favourite characters. And just to prepare you guys beforehand, my favourite characters of Season 1 were actually none of the Titans themselves, which I found very, very strange because I really didn't think it would be that way going into this season. But given with what they did with the Titans and the way that they were written, I just found the supporting characters to be far more interesting in my opinion. You know, characters like Hawk and Dove, who are introduced in episode 2. I really liked them this season. I really liked their story. I really liked their relationship and the dynamic they had with Dick Grayson in particular. You know, just both of them were fantastic, and I loved exploring their origins. You know, with Hank and Dawn, how they become the original Hawk and Dove, you know, and, you know, eventually what happens to them. It's really fantastic, and probably some of my favourite episodes. In fact, no, indeed, my favourite episodes of this season are definitely the ones where those two are heavily involved within the story. And I was somewhat disappointed that we didn't get to see more of them in this season, but I understand that they probably did that so that they didn't put too much of the focus away from the Titans themselves. But those two as characters I really loved. I also really loved Donna Troy in this season as well. Fantastic character as well. Really liked her. Absolutely loved seeing, you know, her using the lasso on screen. Was really, really cool. And she was just an overall badass character. I really hope we get to see more of her in Season 2. Or if not, that we get some time in the future, we do get a spin-off, you know, show on the DC streaming service with her, because I loved her this season. Jason Todd as well, fantastic. I really like Curran Walters in that role. I love the fact that he very much played Jason as someone who was very, very bouncy and optimistic, and, you know, he's really cheerful and happy about being Robin, but then there's that dark side to him as well that, you know, kind of hints at what's to come with him in the future, you know, with Red Hood. Whether we'll get to that with this show or not, I very much like the direction they took his character in, and again, I really hope he's a character we get to see more of in Season 2. And the Doom Patrol as well, and the way they set up the Doom Patrol in this season I thought was really good. That episode was probably one of my favourites. Like, I just loved how they were integrated, especially with the character of Beast Boy. He's very integral with introducing them in this season, and I really liked them, even though I am a bit worried with the fact that a lot of the characters on Doom Patrol, they seem to have been recast for the actual TV show that they're doing, and I'm not the hugest fan of the marketing material for Doom Patrol so far, but based on this episode, I really like the way they portrayed them, and hopefully if their spin-off show is anything like this, then I'll be completely fine with that. I also think some of the cinematography and the fight scenes in here are actually very, very good. There's one in particular in episode 1, it's a fight sequence where Robin is fighting a bunch of criminals in an alleyway, and there's one sequence where he's fighting these two criminals with his staff, and the choreography and the cinematography is fantastic, and some of the fight scenes are very much like that. But I'll get onto this more in my negatives, but I wished we saw more of those style of fight scenes, these very long take fight sequences with good choreograph and cinematography. You know, I really wish we had seen more of that in this season, because I feel like when we got those moments, they were so great, and then when we got other fight sequences that weren't like that, they just felt very underwhelming to me. And I do like some of the more mature themes that this season covered. Yeah, this is definitely not a kid's show. This is definitely something that aims for an older audience, and I think some of the themes that this show does cover in its first season I do think are very well done, and I do think they handle them for the most part in a mature way. And it's definitely a nice subversion of what we expected to see in terms of the themes for the Titans, but I still enjoyed them nevertheless, and I think they very much had their place in this season. I think they were handled very, very well. However, that for me is where the positives end with this season, and now we start to get into the negatives / the nitpicky section, I guess, of this season. and that was the Titans themselves. I didn't really find them to be that standout of characters in my honest opinion. I'm just going to talk about them one by one. We have Dick Grayson. I really wanted to love Dick Grayson this season because Brendan Thwaites, who plays him, is a really good actor. But I feel like what they did with Dick Grayson was they basically just tried to turn him into Jason Todd Mark II. That's what it felt like to me. They're just trying to rip off Jason Todd and turn Dick Grayson into him, when for me that didn't really work. I think it would have worked far better if they had just stuck with the comics and made Dick Grayson this very optimistic character, because that is what separates him and Batman, is the fact that Batman is very dark and brooding, but Dick is very optimistic about things. He's optimistic about crime fighting. He doesn't fight with the darkness that Batman does. That's why he leaves Batman. In this show, he leaves Batman because he doesn't want to be a killer, yet he's going around beating up people, snapping people's necks, stabbing people in the dick. It just felt too far, and it felt too gratuitous, and it felt too far left field of what Dick Grayson is as a character. If they wanted to have this so bad with this level of violence, then you might as well have just made him Jason Todd. Because the fact that you have Jason Todd in this season as well, who acts very similar in my opinion to how Dick does in the show, they just feel like two mirror characters, when I feel like Dick should have stayed as he was in the comics. So that episode with the two of them, you know, with the Jason Todd introductory episode, so that it felt more apparent how different these two were. And I just don't like the direction they took with his character, even though I did like Brendan Thwaites' performance in the role. I also wasn't the biggest fan of Starfire either. I just felt like a storyline with the whole, you know, the thing that she was sent to Earth to destroy Raven and Trigon, and then she ended up losing her memory. I just didn't find her story very interesting, and I also didn't really care for her relationship that she builds with Dick Grayson either. I don't mind the actress who plays her, and I think some of the hate she's gotten online has been very unnecessary and unneeded, but I would be lying if I said that I loved her character, because I really didn't find her that interesting in my opinion. I also didn't think Beast Boy was in this season anywhere near enough, especially in the first half of this season. He's barely in it, and I don't know whether this was because of edits that took out his scenes, because apparently, according to rumours, he was supposed to have a much bigger role in the first half of the season. I was disappointed with that because I really liked Beast Boy. I thought he was a really cool character, and I thought they could have taken him in a lot of different directions, but they kind of just wasted him because he didn't really have that much of an interesting story, even though I did like him as a character. And then we get to Raven. What the heck did they do to Raven? Like, she is awful this season. Easily the worst character on Titans. I didn't like Tegan Croft in the main role. She might be a really nice person in real life, but here I thought her acting was terrible, her delivery was awful, the character was written in such an annoying way, and the fact that she's kind of the center point of this season only makes it even worse. Like, I just didn't like her storyline at all. I thought the way that she transforms into Raven was so cringy and unintentionally funny. Every time she looked at herself in the mirror and she was like turning into Raven, it made me laugh every time because of how cringy it was. The special effects with her I thought weren't very good either. Like, she was easily the worst character of the entire season, and every time a storyline focused around her, I found it so uninteresting and boring, and I just wanted to turn off my TV when she was on screen because she was just such an awful character. I also think that at times this show is way over unnecessarily violent and gratuitous in what it does. For me, if you're going to make a show have a dark tone, it has to make sense within the original context of it. The Teen Titans have never really been this dark beforehand, and at times here it does kind of feel like a natural transition to a more darker tone, but then yeah, like I say, you have moments where Dick's going around stabbing people in the dick and all this other stuff. It doesn't really feel natural. It just feels over the top. It's like, oh, look how edgy we are, you know. It tries to push that edge factor too hard, and as a result, it takes me out of the experience because it's like, oh, they're just clearly trying to do this to appeal to, you know, those, you know, edgy teenagers. Like, it just didn't work for me. It didn't work for what I wanted to see from a Titans show, and the tone at times, like I said, it just felt too unnecessarily dark at times, where it's trying to show off how dark it is, but it's using that to cover up the fact that its story isn't that interesting, to be honest. I also found the series-long storyline of Trigon to be quite underwhelming, especially with the payoff, which I'll get onto later. I didn't particularly find that as engaging of a storyline. Trigon as a villain, I really can't say much about because we literally only saw him for 2 episodes and that was it. So in terms of how he was in this season, I can't really give much of an opinion on that. Hopefully he'll play a bigger role next season, but I found the overall storyline to be a little bit underwhelming for me personally. I also think this season really suffered from re-edits and just changes in production behind the scenes. Like I said, the fact that Beast Boy was so absent from the first half of the season, and just the way the episodes were structured, like the Hank and Dawn episode, I thought was fantastic, but its placement was completely wrong. It should have been an episode in the middle bit of the season, but it was like episode 10, which I thought was crazy. Like, it's the third to last episode of the season, and now you're telling these origin stories. It didn't really make sense for me personally, and as a result, I found that to be really frustrating when it came to, you know, the pacing of the season, because the episode, although I think was great, it did kill the pacing of the story that it was trying to build up. And of course, we have to talk about the finale. This was one of the most disappointing and lackluster finales I've seen for a TV show in quite some time. You know, they built up this entire finale to be Batman versus Robin. But Batman literally not only has only about 2 minutes of screen time, and all of his scenes were spoiled in the trailers. He literally, he doesn't speak, you don't see his face, you don't see the actual Batsuit because it's so awful. Like, the Batsuit as well is terrible for him, it's atrocious. I mean, his fucking cowl ears, they don't even point upwards. It looks so shit. It's not even a proper Batsuit either. There's like leaked set photos from behind the scenes of this suit, and it looks shit. Awful. So that was completely shit, the way that they marketed it. It didn't conclude the Trigon storyline at all. And when you find out that this wasn't actually meant to be the season finale, there was actually an episode 13 that was meant to be the season finale, but apparently it was like scrapped and elements of it will be put into the season 2 premiere. It stinks to me of them just completely fucking up a storyline just because, oh, look at us, it ends on a cliffhanger, now give us a season 2. Like, the whole story of Dick going after Batman could have been cool if we'd actually seen Batman in this episode for more than 2 minutes. It just felt like it was trying to do so much, but feel so restrained at the same time, and it just did not work for me, and it just ended the season on this huge bummer note, which I was very, very disappointed of. And lastly, I have to talk about kind of like the inconsistency within the fight scenes, because whilst I said earlier on that I do like some of the fight scenes in this season, there are also a lot of other times where these are terrible. There's one in particular, I think at the end of episode 6, with Jason Todd, before the episode that he plays a main role in, where he's introduced, and the editing is atrocious, and there are some fight scenes like that where it's so many edits and cuts that it makes your eyes bleed, and the choreography is terrible as well at times. It's just things like that for me personally, especially when I watch a lot of shows with such great choreography like Daredevil and Banshee, that you see something like this and it's just nowhere near on that same level for quite a lot of the time, and it's very, very underwhelming, especially considering the fact that this is a premium TV service. Like, this is something that people have to pay for to see, and you expect good quality, and sadly with the fight sequences, I don't feel like they were very consistent. So overall, despite me having a lot of hate and negativity towards Titans, especially from nitpicks that I had with this season, I think this season is still watchable. You can watch this season. I do think it goes for a lot of strong ideas, and it does succeed in quite a few areas. However, I do find a lot of frustrations with this show, and I definitely think there are a lot of problems that they do need to rectify for the second season whenever that comes out in 2019. So with that all being said, I'm going to give Titans Season 1 the score of a 6 out of 10. And this might seem incredibly brutal. You know, people might argue with me saying I'm being too harsh, but I have to be honest, I just found myself being quite underwhelmed by quite a lot of aspects of this show. For me, the strongest areas of Season 1 was when, funny enough, it didn't focus on the Titans themselves and it actually focused on the supporting characters, because I just found them to be far more interesting or well written than the Titans themselves. And yeah, I enjoyed Season 1, but most certainly not perfect. So thank you all very much for watching my review for Titan Season 1. Like I said, of course, it is now available on Netflix internationally, so you can now watch all 12 episodes on Netflix right now. So like I said, go check it out. Maybe it's for you, maybe it isn't, but let me know down below what your opinions are on Titan Season 1. Leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new to see more reviews and videos like this, and I will see you all again in the next video. Goodbye.